Okay, let's unpack this. Did you know that being a healthy child is like actually becoming a minority now?
It's pretty startling when you put it like that.
Or or how about this, 1 in 3 kids is struggling with anxiety right now? I mean, when you start looking at the actual data, it's frankly shocking. It paints a really concerning picture of children's health today.
It truly is eye-opening, and that's exactly what we're diving into here. This really significant and concerning rise in children's mental health issues and neurodevelopmental stuff too.
Right.
We've really gone through a lot of source material research, expert opinions, even personal stories, trying to get a handle on just how big this challenge is.
Yeah, and our goal with this deep dive, it isn't just to throw numbers at you. We want to help you sort of navigate all this complex information.
Mm-hmm.
We're aiming to pull out the key things from the sources. You know, the sheer scale of the problem, what the experts are saying might be driving it, the signs you might actually see.
Yeah, what to look for.
Exactly. And also some common misunderstandings, things that might be holding us back, and maybe most importantly, where the sources see hope, paths forward.
It's such a critical issue, isn't it? Affecting so many families.
Yeah.
So we really want to make sense of what the experts are discussing, help you see what feels important, and maybe explore some perspectives that go beyond the usual ways of thinking.
Okay, so let's jump right in. The scale. Understanding just how big this is, the numbers alone are, well, they're pretty alarming.
They really do underscore the shift. I mean, the prevalence.
Yeah.
How common these issues are becoming. It's increasing dramatically. Sources are saying, like you mentioned, 1 in 3 kids now have anxiety.
1 in 3. And ADHD. We're looking at 1 in 10 kids today.
1 in 10. And autism diagnoses, they're still climbing too. The latest figures mentioned are 1 in 46 children diagnosed.
Wow.
And if you zoom out, look at overall mental health disorders, it gets even more stark. Sources suggest that by the time they're 18, half of kids will have had some kind of mental health diagnosis.
Oh, wow. That's huge.
Yeah. And at any given moment, roughly a quarter of children and young adults are actively dealing with something like anxiety, depression, or ADHD.
There was that paper, wasn't there, in 2022, saying 1 in 5 kids aged just 3 to 17 had a condition.
Mm-hmm. That's right. 1 in 5. That's a massive part of a generation.
And it's not just about numbers, it's the severity too. The sources talk about teen suicide stats. They're just devastating.
Oh, they're heartbreaking.
Yeah.
Truly. 1 in 5 teens seriously considered suicide. 1 in 10 actually attempted it.
Oh my God.
And suicide is now the second leading cause of death for young people, teens. But what's really, really disturbing is that it's even the 10th leading cause for kids as young as 5 to 9.
5 years old. 10th leading cause.
Yeah. Higher than many infectious diseases we used to worry so much about.
That's hard to even process. And the sources also pointed to other things, right? Like PANS-BANDAS.
Yes, exactly. That autoimmune condition affecting the brain. Estimated at 1 in 200 kids, which is way more common than people think.
Right.
And OCD, obortic disorders, over 1.5 million kids affected. These aren't rare things anymore.
Not at all. And it's so important to remember, like, the sources stress this wasn't just the pandemic.
No, absolutely not. COVID definitely made things worse for many, no doubt. But the sources are clear. The groundwork was laid way before that. Things like hopelessness, sadness, suicidal thoughts. They increased by 40% in the decade before COVID hit.
40% increase before the pandemic. Wow. That first stat you mentioned, being a healthy child is becoming a minority. It just hits hard.
Mm-hmm.
And that other figure, over half of kids, 54%, are on some kind of chronic medication, it feels like. Like, these issues are becoming normalized in a way maybe they shouldn't be.
That's a really key point the sources raise. It's like this gradual creep makes it harder to see the massive change over time. We sort of accept it as the new normal.
Which might stop us asking the tough questions, right? Like, why?
Exactly. That reluctance to dig deeper into the why is a major theme.
It really is shocking when you just lay out the numbers like that. So what stands out most to you when you hear all this? For me, it's definitely that trend before the pandemic. It shows this isn't some sudden blip.
Yeah, that's huge. For me, I think it's the sheer scale across so many different conditions. Anxiety, ADHD, autism, mood disorders. It points towards something broader, doesn't it? Like systemic issues, not just isolated problems.
Right.
Which leads us directly into what the experts in the source material think is going on underneath it all. Why are these numbers rising? They're really pushing past just managing symptoms to look for the root causes.
They really do drill down, don't they? And one really big theme that keeps coming up is what the sources call a broken food system.
Yes, exactly. The basic idea is that even if kids are eating, pretty healthy, they might not be getting the nutrients they actually need. And at the same time, they're getting exposed to stuff that's actively harmful. Processed foods are a massive piece of this puzzle. One expert pointed out that a staggering 67%, 2/3 of kids' calories come from ultra-processed foods.
67%. That's incredible. And it's not just what's missing, is it? It's what's added. The chemicals, the pesticides.
They mentioned tests on school lunches, finding pesticides and heavy metals in like 94% of them.
94% in school lunches.
Yeah. And we know these kinds of exposures can really impact developing brains' overall health.
And it's not just food, right? The sources talk about other hidden toxins.
Right, in the environment. Things like plastics, chemicals in everyday products, air pollution, even electromagnetic fields, EMF, from technology. And the key thing here is that kids are just more vulnerable because they're smaller.
Like a smaller bucket filling up faster.
Exactly that analogy. They reach their toxic load threshold much quicker than adults do with the same exposure levels. It makes perfect sense.
It does.
Another area the sources really flag as huge is the gut-brain connection.
Ah, yes, I found that fascinating.
It's massive. Basically, problems in a child's digestive system, their gut can have a direct and profound impact on their brain function, their mood, their focus. Well, the experts point to things like hidden gut infections, maybe parasites or imbalances in the bacteria there, inflammation in the gut. All these things can disrupt that critical communication pathway between the gut and the brain.
And isn't it true that a lot of our feel-good chemicals, like serotonin, dopamine, they're actually made in the gut, not just the brain?
A huge amount, yeah. So if the gut factory isn't working properly, it directly affects the brain supply of these crucial mood regulators. Makes total sense, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And then there's stress. The sources talk a lot about stress, too.
A different kind of stress than maybe we think of. They argue kids today are dealing with really big, almost adult problems.
Like what?
Worries about the planet, climate change, feeling overwhelmed by the 24/7 news cycle, violence, and also just absorbing the stress and anxiety from the adults around them. Kids are like little sponges for that energy.
It's true. They pick up on everything.
And this emotional overwhelm can really dysregulate their whole system. Some experts even propose that things like anxiety and depression might actually be outward signs of underlying physical issues, like brain inflammation, triggered by this mix of stress and toxins.
Brain inflammation. Wow. They even mentioned studies finding markers usually seen in adults with neurodegenerative diseases and kids exposed to air pollution.
Yeah, suggesting potential links that really need more attention. It's quite concerning.
So ultimately, the message from the sources isn't about finding one single smoking gun.
No, not at all. It's about the cumulative effect. The total load, as they call it. All these factors converging, the toxins, the processed food, the stress, the gut issues, maybe infections, it all adds up.
And it overwhelms the child's system, stops development progressing like it should.
That seems to be the idea. And what's really powerful is that one practice mentioned genetics were not the main driver in over 99% of the neurodevelopmental cases they saw.
99%, so it's rarely just predetermined.
It suggests it's much more about these environmental and lifestyle factors that we can potentially influence, rather than just genetic fate.
That's a huge shift in thinking, isn't it? From it's just how they are to what's contributing to this.
Absolutely. And understanding these potential underlying factors helps us kind of decode what we might be seeing on the outside.
Which brings us to the practical side. Okay, so if these things are happening underneath, what does it look like? What are the clues, the signs? Parents, educators, what should we be looking for according to the sources?
Yeah, this is really important. The sources encourage us to become like a little private investigator for our kids. Pay really close attention.
Okay, so what kind of things are we investigating?
We'll start with the basics. Developmental milestones. Are they hitting them roughly on time? Or maybe even more concerning, are they seeming to go backwards, losing skills they already had? That's called regression.
Regression, okay. And what about how they interact?
Yeah, change is there. Like, are they suddenly avoiding eye contact? Do they seem less cuddly or affectionate than they used to be? Are they pulling away from interacting with people?
And emotionally, behaviorally.
Big shifts there, potentially. Tantrums or anger outbursts that feel like they come out of nowhere and seem way bigger than the situation warrants.
Right.
Constant crankiness, irritability.
Yeah.
Maybe seeming kind of disconnected, not plugged in. I'm having a really hard time with transitions or changes in routine.
Okay.
Or even sensory stuff, being super bothered by clothes tags, seams in socks, certain food textures. The sources described it as kids not feeling comfortable in their own skin.
That's a good way to put it. What about physical signs? Were those mentioned?
Oh yeah, definitely. Things like major sleep problems, not being able to fall asleep, stay asleep, lots of unexplained crying, bathroom accidents, like bedwetting, well after they've been trained, getting sick all the time, or those persistent complaints, headaches, stomach aches that doctors maybe can't find a clear reason for.
In school. What might show up at school?
Could be a sudden drop in grades, or struggling way more than usual to focus. Maybe being disruptive in class, or even ongoing issues with things like handwriting that just don't seem to improve with practice.
Okay.
The really crucial point the sources make here is that kids often don't have the words to say, hey, my gut feels weird, or I feel inflamed and agitated.
Right.
Their behavior and these physical signs are their communication. That tantrum, the clinginess, the stomach ache, it's them trying to tell us something is wrong. We need to look past the surface.
That completely reframes it, doesn't it? Instead of just seeing a difficult child, you start asking, okay, what is this behavior telling me? What's underlying this?
Exactly. It shifts from blame or frustration towards curiosity and support. And that shift in perspective is key to challenging some common beliefs or, well, myths that the sources say often get in the way.
All right, let's talk about those myths. What are some of the big misunderstandings about kids' mental health that the experts and the sources really push back on?
Probably the biggest one is the idea that it's all just a behavior problem, that the child is choosing to act out. The experts argue really strongly against that. They say the behavior is almost always a symptom of something going on inside. Maybe an infection, like we mentioned, or some kind of irritation, inflammation, something physical.
There was that powerful example, wasn't there? The little boy with rage issues.
Yes, the 5-year-old.
Yeah.
Turned out he had an active Epstein-Barr virus infection. He wasn't just being defiant. He was likely in pain, feeling awful, maybe scared. The rage was a sign of that internal distress.
Wow. So not a discipline issue at all. Which leads to the next myth, right? That parents just aren't being strict enough.
Exactly. The sources are quick to say parents are usually doing their absolute best, often feeling desperate. And the experts point out that if there's an underlying physical imbalance like those gut issues, no amount of discipline alone is going to fix the root cause of the behavior.
Makes sense. What about the idea that kids will just grow out of it?
Ah, yes. The sources really caution against just waiting and hoping. While some kids might mature out of certain phases, they share stories of adults who are still struggling years, even decades later, with issues that started in childhood. Relying on growing out of it for significant problems often isn't realistic, unfortunately.
Okay. And medication, the idea that it's the only answer or always the first step.
This is a big one. The experts featured in the sources generally see medication as something that primarily manages symptoms, a Band-Aid, as some put it.
Right.
Which can be necessary and helpful sometimes, absolutely. But it often doesn't address the underlying why. They mention the paradox of using stimulants for hyperactivity. It shows how complex brain chemistry is and how much we still don't fully understand.
So the message isn't anti-medication necessarily, but...
More that it shouldn't automatically be seen as the only tool or the best starting point without first exploring why the symptoms are there. That doesn't fix the root cause.
Got it. So the sources are really pushing us to shift the question. Instead of what symptom needs managing, ask what's causing this symptom.
Precisely. And reinforcing that it's complex, it's rarely the parent's fault, and it usually stems from multiple things interacting.
And understanding that looking for those root causes, that's really where the hope comes in, isn't it? The sources share some really inspiring stories there.
Yes, this is where the tone really shifts. It highlights that experts have seen incredible improvements, even full reversals, in conditions often considered lifelong. And it comes from taking that whole body approach, functional or integrative medicine. Often calls it that focusing on finding and fixing the root issues.
The story about the boy with tics and anxiety was pretty compelling.
It really was. His symptoms, the blinking tics, the anxiety, were eventually traced back to significant exposure to pesticides and mercury.
Wow. How did they address that?
Well, the mother described a really comprehensive approach. It involved supporting his body's detoxification pathways, making very specific dietary changes, doing body work, even things like sitting in a sauna with him regularly. It perfectly illustrates that total load idea. By removing the overwhelming toxic burden and supporting his body's natural healing processes, his dietics and anxiety improved dramatically.
That's amazing. And the story about the woman who reversed her autoimmune condition, the one labeled irreversible.
Yeah, that's another powerful example of taking charge. She was told her Hashimoto's thyroid condition was permanent. She'd need medication for life.
Right.
But she held on to this belief that the body is infinitely capable of healing, and that her symptoms were messengers, signaling something was out of balance. So she became her own investigator.
What did she look into?
Her all unique factors: diet, gut health, hidden toxins, stress levels. She put together a personalized plan, addressed those things, and actually reversed the condition. Her story really emphasizes taking ownership, becoming your own primary healthcare provider, as she put it.
Incredible. And then there was the account of the boy diagnosed with ADHD very young, at 4.
Mm-hmm. His mother initially went the conventional route, using strong stimulant medication, but she saw really concerning side effects.
Like what?
She described extreme meltdowns when the medication wore off, actually more hyperactivity than severe sleep problems, loss of appetite, and just a lot of anxiety stemming from all of that. It sounded really tough.
Oh, absolutely. What made her change course?
She mentioned a specific moment after a really difficult public meltdown where she just thought, there has to be a better way. That's what pushed her to explore the root cause approach.
And what did that involve for them?
She started with a food-first strategy, removing common inflammatory foods like gluten, dairy, soy, artificial colors, flavors, preservatives, big dietary changes.
Just diet.
No, that was the start. She also used functional lab testing. And guess what they found?
What?
Underlying gut issues, parasites, bacterial overgrowth, things directly impacting that gut-brain connection we talked about.
Wow, okay. So food changes, gut healing, anything else?
Yeah, targeted supplements based on the lab results to address those specific imbalances, a conscious effort to reduce exposure to environmental toxins in their home, and making sure he got regular exercise. It was multifaceted.
And the outcome?
She emphasized it took time. Rome wasn't built in a day. But the result was a huge improvement in his ADHD symptoms. More peace, more calm for the whole family. Her big takeaway was that medication isn't the only way, and it often doesn't get to the why.
These stories are they really drive home that key point from the experts, don't they? That focusing on identifying and addressing the root causes, not just masking symptoms, can lead to really profound positive changes.
Absolutely. Real changes in kids' bodies and minds. And importantly, the message is it's never too late to start exploring these other possibilities.
They offer such concrete examples of what's possible with a different perspective. Mm-hmm. Now, before we wrap up, the sources also included a really simple, but I thought quite vital perspective from a child himself, Abdullah.
Ah, yes, his input was great. His definition of mental health was wonderfully broad, wasn't it?
It really was. Emotional, mental, physical, even spiritual well-being, he included.
Yeah. And he made a really good point about why kids sometimes struggle to accept they have a problem.
What was that?
He said it's because they can't see it. It's not like a broken arm you can point to. That invisibility makes it harder for them to grasp or even acknowledge something's wrong internally.
That's a really insightful point for a kid to make. And he also talked about self-care, didn't he?
Yes. Underscored how important it is to prioritize that, especially when life gets busy and stressful.
And his advice was pretty straightforward.
Super simple, but effective. Things like just taking a conscious breath, being mindful, noticing your feelings or what's around you, like listening to birds. Maybe meditation.
Mm-hmm.
And he shared his own realization, quite maturely, that he needed to kind of fix himself first before he could be truly helpful to others. It's wisdom that applies to all of us, really.
Definitely. So this deep dive has given us a really good overview, drawing from all these sources. They do indicate there's more to unpack though, right? Like digging deeper into specific factors like diet or toxins or infections and future discussions.
For sure. There's definitely a lot more complexity we can get into down the road.
Okay, so bringing this all together, we've covered the, frankly, alarming scale of the challenges kids are facing with mental and neurodevelopmental health. We've looked at what experts in the sources think are the multiple root causes behind it all. Mm-hmm. We've outlined practical signs to look out for, busted some common myths that might hinder progress, and importantly, we've shared these really powerful stories of hope and real change that come from focusing on the root causes.
Yeah, the consistent thread is that while it's complex, involving so many factors, digging into those underlying causes is absolutely crucial. And despite the daunting stats, Those experiences shared really do offer powerful proof that hope and healing are genuinely possible.
So here's a thought to leave you with. Given just how many different things might be impacting kids today, food, toxins, stress, gut health, infections, all of it does the way we typically think about and treat mental health issues need a pretty fundamental rethink.
Or maybe put another way, if making targeted changes in areas like diet or reducing toxic load or supporting gut health can lead to such dramatic improvements in children's focus, mood, and behavior, what does that really tell us about the deep connection between physical health and mental well-being for everyone?
Lots to think about there. We would genuinely love to hear from you. Please drop us a note in the comment section below. Let us know what you thought of this deep dive, what resonated most with you, maybe what questions it raised.
Yeah, we'd love to hear your thoughts. Thanks for joining us for this.
We'll see you next time.